Well, I don't know if people figure it out. That's like asking a straight person, when did you first realize you were straight? It's just an identity. It just was always there. I never had to figure it out. And I don't think a lot of gay people ever have to figure it out. What was it like being in Jamaica? I actually wouldn't know because I wasn't in Jamaica. I was, I was involved in the church. I was pretty devout, pretty sort of, I guess by their definition, normal. So I have friends who were on the front lines and some who went through some difficult times and some terrible times. But my struggles were primarily internal. I remember running into a journalist who was very disappointed that I couldn't find tales of this anti-gay Gestapo hunting me down to kill me. I was like, no, actually, I was driven more by boredom than anything else. It's that's kind of what it was. I went through more struggles just growing up in the suburbs than anything else. Well, they're still not. It's not a past tense. I don't have resentment for the church at all. I just recognize what it is. And I think that a lot of the homophobia that exists in Jamaica and the Caribbean, certainly in Africa, comes because the brand of Christianity, and the church can sometimes seem like I'm knocking all Christians, and that's not it at all. But the certain branches of Christianity that tend to be very charismatic justify hatred. And in the cases of countries like Uganda and Nigeria, they introduce hatred. These countries weren't homophobic before until a bunch of preachers, when they're not doing TV, come and tell them to be homophobic. It's an invented thing. I hope we do, which is not, again, an attack on religion, but I think it's something we need to address. It's the 21st century. There's certain, the kind of having this demagoguery having full sway over people's lives it's barbaric. It's time to move beyond that, and especially for nations that claim that they're secular. The problem, I remember in Minnesota when we had this huge fight for gay marriage, and a lot of people who were actually Bible-thumping church people were going out supporting it. Not because they necessarily like gay people, but they don't like the idea of one branch of Christianity dictating how the rest of the world should behave. It's not just a church, it's one church that's telling an entire population, we want you to behave this way. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to do that in the modern world. And I think that's something that people, I think, are going to become more and more, or rather put it this way, less and less tolerant of. I think we're becoming less tolerant of people's intolerance. I'm a refugee of a lot of things. No. One, because I didn't experience it directly. Although it did hover, it hovers. It's, I don't know if I think I'm a refugee any more than I think I'm an exile. It's because it wasn't my direct experience. I also think it cheapens people who are refugees, who really did escape some horrendous realities, which I hope people don't ignore. But I don't want to claim membership with that. At the same time, did it contribute in me leaving? Of course it did. Of course it did. I don't have to experience violence to be afraid of it. But I think there's a rush to simplify the narrative when it comes to our countries, when it comes to Jamaica, India, wherever, and it's on both sides. Jamaica is not this den of homophobic mad people trying to kill the next gay person. It's not at all. The bulk of my support system is still in that country. At the same time, we're kidding ourselves if we don't think it's not a bad thing. And we're kidding ourselves if we don't realize how much the church contributes to it. So it's, I recognize the complication of that country. And I grew up in it. I recognize the complication. I recognize there's complexity. I recognize there's lots of good, but I'm certainly not letting it off the hook. I hope not, because violence is not the only thing in the book. It's interesting. Most of the people, a lot of people in the novel talk about and fear violence, but they don't really experience it. And once we're past, the killing of a few hitmen, there isn't a lot in it. And I think there's this sort of fetishizing of violence in the novel. But I also think that the problem isn't to not write about violence, or rather the solution is not to ignore these things, but to recognize the complexity and complication in it. Nobody goes around thinking, oh my God, Italian Americans are the violent people because they watch The Godfather. I still go to places in New York which, according to film, I shouldn't go. I think it's a loss on the reader's part if they use this as a way of defining an entire country. At the same time, I can't tell all 2 million stories with one novel. And I did think about it, even as writing this novel, am I perpetuating some of the stereotypes that I am also trying to fight against? And I almost fell into the trap of thinking the solution is to just not talk about these things. That's not the solution. The solution is, as always, if you're a novelist, if you're a good one, that you recognize complexity and ambivalence, and you never go for the easy answer. So I think if people look at the novel as this damnation of the country, or worse, look at the novel as a full-on portrait of the entire country, I think that's their loss. It really wasn't. It wasn't. Again, the New York Times article ends in 2002, which was 3 years ago. So I am not that person either. So it wasn't a release. It is one of the things I do, and I teach my students this, that if you're ever going to write good nonfiction, you have to turn yourself into a character. So Marlon James, the writer, and Marlon James, the character I write about, they're not different people. They are me, clearly. But when I'm writing, they might as well be two strangers. And not every writer believes in a sort of writerly detachment, but I do. So it wasn't cathartic, actually. It was, I just stated what it is. In fact, the whole article began because the editor at New York Times just gave me a prompt. This is Voyage of the Will, write something. And that's what happened. Writing can be cathartic. That's what I write journals for. But when I get to the point where I am actually expressing, when I'm writing serious fiction or nonfiction, I actually have almost zero emotional stake in it. Which is why most people can't tell the parts of my novel I wrote when I was having a miserable day, as opposed to the part I wrote when I was having a great day. There really is no difference between them. Because I think if you're going to write and you're going to stay in writing, you have to get to a point where the work is the work. And the work doesn't care how you feel. But when I get up in the day, the book I'm writing couldn't care less if I'm angry at the world and want to die. It's like, that's wonderful. Commit suicide on your own time. You got a chapter to write. And that's really how I write. That's how I do not bring myself in it at all. Well, yeah, and I've gotten a lot of feedback, particularly in the Caribbean, from people who say that's my story. And just the idea that somebody would put that out there, be very public with it, none of which I really thought deeply about. I was just doing an essay for the New York Times. But they felt very inspired and very relieved. And also this sense, one of the problems when you're struggling with anything is a sense that you're alone. It's one of the ways in which these struggles beat us. And for a lot of people, just the knowledge that they weren't alone did wonders for them. That said, a lot of people said some absolutely horrible things and some horrendous things, and they continue to. I don't care. I mean, I don't read comments. I don't read comments. I barely read reviews. Or I'd go mad. I'm a big fan of Rihanna, And sometimes I read the comments people say about her. And I'm like, man, thank God she doesn't read this. Or you wouldn't get up in the morning. So there comes a point where you just have to, at the end of the day, the only thing I'm concerned about is, am I doing my best work? I think it already has. Again, because I'm pretty, I'm pretty outspoken about a lot of things. Sometimes without thinking about it, but I've always been a pretty outspoken person, and I've never stopped. And I think, especially in a country where we don't necessarily speak about things publicly, we talk about it on our verandas. We don't talk about it in public forums and TV interviews and so on, and I really don't care. Part of it too is I'm 45 years old. I'm like, I'm at a stage right now, I'm too old to worry about stuff. But I do think, yeah, it will be different. I think there'll be a lot of people who support what I do, and there'll be a lot of people who are relieved that I say the things that I say, and I put out the book that I did, and the articles that I write. And there'll be people who will think, this satanic sodomite scum from the pits of hell should go back where he came from. My response to that is nobody can kick me out of the country that I have a right to be in. And also I don't think I can, you can make a choice, I think, whether it bothers you or not. And I'd rather focus on all the great stuff about Jamaica and about coming home and family and friends than focus on the negativity. When did I first fall in love? Have I fallen in love yet? When did I first fall in love? I may have been 8. Plus, I'm getting old. I can't remember all that stuff. I don't think so. The problem is now you're going to have me go home and think about it. I don't know if you need to be in love. That's a very, because then we come back to this idea that literature must be experiential, and it doesn't. This is one of the reasons why we have this thing called women's fiction, and there's no such thing. Women can write about whatever they want. I think some people feel because women's fiction must be experiential, they should only write about love and family and raising babies, as if women have been writing about politics and religion and sociocultural, and the sacred and the profane forever. I don't necessarily. I tell my students, I have my students say, write about, somebody gave me this exercise, and I give it to students. It says, think of the person you love more than any person in the world. Think of that person. Since it's in your head, it can be as arbitrary as you want. We love some brothers more than other brothers. Think of that person who you love more than anybody else in the world. Now I want you to write a 3-page story of how you bury them. And I said, everything you're gonna write in that story is all the empathy you need to write any story. Okay? It's a brutal, because they didn't see it coming. It's a brutal thing to ask them to do. And you'll never see so much bawling as that class. I was like, yeah, because I had them think about that for a very long time. Say, no, write a story where you bury them. Or just bury them. Yeah, it's what it does is that you realize that universality of experience that you're looking for, you have. So a 12-year-old can write a love poem. A man can write about women. It's like the crucial things of human experience we all do. We all love, we all hate, we grieve, we mourn, we regret, we surprise, we disappoint. And you can use the intensity of one kind of experience and apply it to another. Did I just profoundly disturb you?